How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Zone Defense. I'm Drew, joined by my co-host Ryan and Chris. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Instagram at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. Today, we're continuing our NFL divisions deep dive with the NFC North, a division I know that we're all really excited to talk about. So, Chris, why don't you give us a brief overview of the NFC North?
Yeah, this is definitely a more exciting division. It's a little top heavy with the Vikings and the Packers probably being the two best teams in this division. But the Lions and the Bears, they can make some noise this year. A lot of key additions to the team, especially the Lions in that regard. The Vikings and the Packers both lost a lot of pieces. We're gonna see if they can still remain atop this division.
Yeah, you mentioned it there. It's really been a two horse race pretty much for the entire decade, aside from that 1 year, a couple seasons ago when the Bears broke through and won the division. But we're going to start off. The first team we're going to talk about is one of those two top dogs, and that is the Minnesota Vikings. Now, last year they had a pretty good season. They finished 10-6, which is good enough to earn a wild card berth into the playoffs. They actually pulled off one of the biggest upsets of the NFL playoffs, in my opinion at least, by beating the New Orleans Saints in the wild card round. But then they unfortunately lost to the 49ers in the next round in the divisional round, and the Niners, of course, went on to win the NFC crown. In the offseason, they really didn't add a ton in free agency. They added Michael Pierce, the defensive tackle, and then Tajay Sharp, which is a decent third wide receiving option. They lost quite a few key pieces from many of their good teams over the last few seasons, most notably Stephon Diggs, a wide receiver they lost in the trade with the Buffalo Bills. Of course, Diggs did provide some kind of off-the-field drama and really wanted to get out of Minnesota, it seemed like, all of last year. But he was super talented, and they're definitely going to miss having him as an elite wide receiving option. They also lost cornerback Trey Waynes to the Bengals, edge rusher Everson Griffin, who is yet to sign with the team, but the Vikings, I believe, are not going to re-sign him. Cornerback Mackenzie Alexander to the Bengals as well. Defensive tackle Linval Joseph to the Chargers. Cornerback Xavier Rhodes to the Colts. Safety Andrew Sendejo to the Browns. Guard Josh Klein, who is still a free agent, but the Vikings, again, did not decline to re-sign him. Outside linebacker Stephen Weatherly to the Panthers, and then safety Jaron Kearse to divisional foe, the Detroit Lions. In the draft, they had a ton of picks, which kind of made up for the lack of free agency moves they made. I believe it was either the most or second most picks of any NFL team in this year's draft. In the first round, they had two first-round picks. They spent the first one on elite wide receiving prospect Justin Jefferson from LSU. They spent second first-round pick on Jeff Gladney, cornerback out of TCU. In the second round, they took Ezra Cleveland, offensive tackle out of Boise State. And in the third round, they took Cameron Dantzler, the cornerback out of Mississippi State. So, Ryan, do you think the Vikings will have enough to maybe repeat and make the playoffs again, or maybe even overthrow the Packers, win the division? Or do you think the lack of overall moves they made this year makes them maybe take a step back?
Honestly, I think with all that they lost on defense, I'm getting a little worried about Minnesota. It's losing guys like Trey Waynes, Everson Griffin, Xavier Rhodes, kind of the stalwarts of that tough defense that Mike Zimmer ran all those years. Kind of puts a lot of the pressure on the offense and Kirk Cousins, who I really don't have a lot of faith in. Offensively, they did get Justin Jefferson, so he'll move inside to the slot, which will move Adam Thielen out to the X receiver. I think it'll be a bounce back year for Thielen. He'll be facing a lot of single coverage, press coverage off the line. He's very physical wide receiver, very fast. I think he'll have a bounce back year, but I think offensively a lot of the load goes on Cousins and Dalvin Cook. Can Cook stay healthy and help out Kirk Cousins? If not, I think will be a long year for the Minnesota Vikings with all those losses on defense.
Yeah, I definitely want to address Dalvin Cook. You didn't get to quite touch up on it. He might even hold out. I'm not even sure if he's going to play this year. I really don't think the Vikings are going to give him another contract, at least right now. Especially what he wants. I think he wants north of $13 million, which is kind of in the range of what Melvin Gordon wanted last year and couldn't get. So, and this is a team that's already cash strapped in terms of salary cap. They had to dump Diggs just because they literally don't have any cap flexibility. This is why you're seeing so many guys leave the team. Like Trey Waynes, I think he's making over $10 million a year. Griffin, that's another guy they couldn't pay. Joseph, another guy they couldn't pay. And Rhodes, obviously, he's kind of washed up, but another guy they probably didn't want to pay. So all that to probably not re-sign Dalvin Cook. That just seems like a lot of losses. And then if Cook's not playing, this offense is not going to be good, and they are not going to make the playoffs without him because they had to rely on him just to get there last year.
Yeah, I think the Vikings are going to be the best team. They were kind of my divisional pick before I kind of did some more research, and the lack of overall offseason moves kind of scares me, as well as Dalvin Cook. I mean, even if he does sign, injuries have always been a concern with him. But when he is healthy, of course, he is one of the best top 5 or 6 backs in the entire league. So they did have a pretty good draft, though. I really like Justin Jefferson. I thought he was better than Jalen Reagor, who the Eagles, of course, took one pick before. So I thought they kind of lucked out there, and I think Jefferson could kind of replace Diggs. But I don't know. The lack of moves, and they definitely lost a lot of pieces there, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So it does kind of scare me. And hopefully, a lot of the teams in this division, it is pretty tight, but they all have serious question marks. I think the Vikings are not excluded from that.
No, definitely not on that. Michael Pierce, pretty much their only big signing in the offseason. He's a really talented player. Really good run stopping threat there. He's definitely going to help out their rush defense, which was kind of average last year. It wasn't too bad, but also wasn't exceptional. Their pass defense is something to be concerned about, though, because losing, say what you want about Rhodes, he's still not a bad corner. Trey Wayne's also not terrible. I'd say he's a decent cornerback, too. Territory, but they did draft Jeff Gladney, which may have been a little bit of a reach. There's a couple guys I think I liked more out that were still on the board, but him and Cameron Dantzler, if they can pay off, this DB core could be pretty good with still having Harrison Smith, and they re-signed Anthony Harris, which is a big move for them. He's a up and coming free safety, one of the top ones in the league for sure.
Yeah, Chris, you mentioned Cameron Dantzler. I want to kind of focus on him because I thought he was a steal. The reason that he fell is if you didn't see the combine, he did run like a 4.64, which is pretty slow for a corner, pretty concerning. But news did come out that he was harboring an injury. Yep. And at his pro day, he did run like close to a 4.4. So I think that was a steal for Minnesota. Like Chris said, I think Gladney and Dantzler can form a very formidable quarterback duo for years to come. So I think those were two great selections.
Yeah, definitely. Gladney, like I said, maybe a little bit of a reach, but at the same time, yeah, Dantzler was definitely a steal. I liked him up in the second round for sure. Honestly, right around the range of Gladney. I think they were very close in my cornerback rankings in terms of rookies, but they could definitely form a formidable duo in this division. I don't know if it's going to be quite this year, but if they can be a little bit better than I'm expecting them to be in their rookie season, and one of them can pop off and be one of the better corners in this draft class, I think they could be a pretty good defense, definitely in the top half of the league in terms of defense, which they will need to be if they're going to make the playoffs.
Yeah, he could definitely. I mean, Xavier Rhodes kind of fell off there a little bit, but they could definitely kind of fill in and maybe even be as good as Rhodes was a few seasons ago, which would be really cool. I think we'd be remiss, though, if we didn't mention Kirk Cousins. We haven't mentioned him yet. A lot of people were worried that he had the big choker label there, couldn't win the big games pretty much his entire career. But last year, he kind of silenced some of those doubters by pulling off that big win against the Saints that I mentioned at the top. Do you think that maybe he's due for a big season this year because he's kind of maybe got that monkey off his back?
I don't know if that was so much Kirk Cousins as it was the Saints just choking or not feeling they're not showing up. Honestly, I didn't buy Kirk Cousins a few years ago. I still don't buy him now. We talked about it, especially if he doesn't get Dalvin Cook back. I don't see this offense going anywhere. No matter who you have lining up on the outside, Thielen or Jefferson, I don't see this offense going anywhere. So unless Cook plays and he's able to utilize play action, I don't see Cousins having a good year.
I think Cousins could be all right this year. He kind of fits into a nice role that they give him here as a game manager. He's a pretty accurate quarterback. Nothing spectacular in that regard, but I think he can hit Jefferson and Thielen for a pretty good completion percentage this year. I think Jefferson's going to be one of the higher producers among this rookie wide receiver class. I think he's going to be one of the better ones this year, and he's a very talented player. I think he had almost 20 touchdowns last year, and he's an incredible wide receiver. He was so good last year with Burrow. And I expect him to be a red zone threat again this year. And he's going to line up a little bit in the slot, too. I think people are kind of just locking Thielen into that role. Jefferson also lines up in the slot a lot. So it's going to be fun to see that. I feel like they're going to be able to mismatch or mix and match those two a lot. And it's going to be really interesting to see which one kind of emerges as a slot receiver and which one succeeds more in an outside role.
Yeah, and I want to go back real quick, too. Ryan, you mentioned that he wasn't like mainly it was because of the Saints they won that game. I mean, Cousins still had to pull off that epic throw though to Adam Thielen to set the game-winning score. I mean, I feel like that was a clutch play, and I think a couple of years ago maybe he doesn't make that play, and a lot of people were pointing that as maybe he's finally getting that monkey off his back. Of course, they didn't play great against the Niners in the next round, but who knows? Maybe that's just what he needs to move forward and have a really good season. But I'm kind of with you, Chris. I think he's going to have not a great year, but maybe like a top 10, top 15 type of quarterback season.
Yeah, top 15 is kind of where I'm expecting for him, and that's he'll need to be pretty good for them to make the playoffs, especially with the loss of Diggs. That's going to take a little bit of pressure. It's going to put a little more pressure on him because Diggs is such a good receiver, and we don't really know what Jefferson is yet. So he's going to have to make more accurate throws to Jefferson, clearly, because he's a rookie. He's not as good as Diggs.
Yeah, Diggs. I don't know. I feel like Diggs is a great receiver, but he was like he was kind of calling Cousins out in the media, saying how like he really wanted to trade and all this stuff. And I feel like maybe losing him, you might lose the talent, especially this season. I know we're mainly focused on this season, but I think Jefferson maybe in 2021 could really adequately fill that role that Diggs left, and also just be an overall better dude than maybe Diggs was off the field, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm excited to see what Jefferson can do. Like I said, one of my favorite receivers from this class. I think he's gonna be really talented. I think he's gonna have a really good career in this league. Hopefully, I'm right. Tajay Sharp certainly isn't gonna be the answer there.
All right, unless you guys have any other Vikings things, we're going to jump into our fantasy studs, which we did for the NFC East divisional breakdown. Ryan, how would you start us off with maybe a key Vikings player you think could pay dividends for fantasy football players this year?
Well, I think with Dalvin Cook holding out right now, it's kind of obvious. It's Adam Thielen. Like I mentioned earlier, Justin Jefferson's going to move to the slot, which moves Thielen out to the X receiver position on the split end. So he's going to be all alone out there in single coverage a lot of the time. And I think with his physicality and his speed, he's going to be able to beat whoever's matched up against him. I think he's going to have a big year, a big bounce back year for Adam Thielen.
Yeah, I definitely like Thielen for this year as well. I think he's going to be a guy you can draft as your wide receiver too, because people are going to give up on him after kind of an injury riddled season last year, and you can draft him as your wide receiver too. And if he pops off like he did a couple years ago, you're getting a wide receiver one for that wide receiver two value. You probably draft him in the third or fourth round. That's where I'd be very comfortable taking him, and then I think people would even be scared to take him in the fourth or fifth round. So you might be able to get him back there in the fifth round, which would be awesome. It's a great value as your wide receiver two or three, and if you have him on your team there, that's a really good value there. I kind of want to address. This is kind of an off the board pick. You could talk about Jefferson a little bit if you want, but I'm going to go with Alexander Madison because I'm not sure if Dalvin Cook's going to play or not this year. Alexander Madison's a very capable running back. He's almost as good as Dalvin Cook, in my opinion. I think he's a very talented back. If he was given that lead dog role, I think he's going to catch some passes. I think he's going to run some in from the goal line. He's got the ability to pop off a pretty big play as well. He proved that last year, getting a decent amount of workload after Dalvin Cook going down with an injury, and during games, he was a little bit more than a handcuff player. He was a guy you can maybe throw into your flex and get like 5 to 7 points if you really needed him to. But this is a guy I could see returning RB2 to RB1 value if Dalvin Cook does hold out, because he's a very capable and talented running back behind him.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Dalvin Cook was going to be the first guy either of you guys picked, so he kind of just fell to me here. I think Dalvin, I mean, like I said at the top, he's one of the best running backs in the game, especially for fantasy owners. Of course, the injuries are a concern, especially the holdout is a big concern. But I would say that if he starts dropping a little bit, and because people are kind of wary to kind of take on him, I mean, he's a really good option there at an RB2 or maybe even a flex option if he drops there. So if he drops maybe like 6 or 7 rounds, I don't think he'll probably be available at that point, but I don't know. Like if people are worried if he's just there, I mean, definitely try and take him. But Justin Jefferson too, I think he could be a really good pick. I think he's a rookie guy. Like I said, he's kind of filling in that role that Stephon Diggs left a little bit, so he could be another really good option for fantasy owners.
See, when you say 6 to 7 rounds for Dalvin Cook falling, I think that's practically impossible for him, even if he's almost guaranteed to hold off. You look at this is a very similar situation to Melvin Gordon, because Gordon last year, he literally said he was going to hold out, and I was still willing to draft him in the start of the fourth round, and that was definitely a mistake. But you have to factor in that he got off to a slow start when he came back last year. I could see that for Dalvin Cook. If he missed the first couple games and then came back, he's not going to be fantasy relevant for the first week or two of that. He's got to get back into shape. He's got to get back into that game script. And you're going to I think it's going to be a really similar season to Melvin Gordon. If he does not come back before he announces his holdout or whatever, he comes back in July, he's going to be fine. He'll be a top 6 pick in the draft, most likely. But if he starts falling in draft, it's going to be very concerning.
I was using that basis that like the 6, 7's a little bit excessive. I agree, but like 4 or 5, he could still be there because I remember
I could see him falling to the fourth round for sure.
A few years ago when Le'Veon Bell had his whole holdout situation, before he left the Steelers, and even when Zeke Elliott had that whole thing where he was like going to get suspended, then wasn't going to get suspended, and then he got suspended, they fell to like the 4th or 5th round. So I don't think you could take Dalvin Cook in the 1st or 2nd round, but if he's there to like 4th to 6th range, which I think is possible, definitely just take a waiver on him. because even if he does kind of have that Melvin Gordon like thing where he's not great at the start of the year, he could really pay off, especially down the stretch
Yeah.
near playoffs, as long as he stays healthy. Because there are definite concerns with him health wise too. But
Yeah, I'm definitely a little concerned about Cook going into this season in terms of real life and fantasy. If he, like I said, if he does come back, if they give him a contract, or if he decides he's just going to come back and play this year very soon, I'm not worried at all. I'm going to draft him in the top 7 picks, no doubt about it. But anything other than that, I'm off of him. I got burned by Gordon last year a little bit. I don't want to do it again.
Real quick before we jump into like our overall grade of the offseason, I want to just do a little game here. So we're talking about Dalvin Cook, just odds that he is going to suit up here for 2020 for the Vikings. So how about Chris? You start us off here. What are the odds?
So I'd say the odds of him suiting up for them at any point are basically just like they're 100%. Like it's gonna happen. But if if it gets a little further in, I think he's gonna miss a game at least this season. I think he's gonna miss at least one. That's what I'm gonna say. I think the odds of that are also 100%. He's gonna miss at least one game.
Yeah, I'm gonna say 80-20 because first of all, we don't even know if we're gonna have football in the fall, like with the whole coronavirus thing.
Yeah,
So that's why
assuming we
I
do.
said that. Yeah. So okay. So assuming we do 100%, like Chris said, I mean, he's gonna want to get paid at some point. He's gonna want to return to the field at some point. He can't hold out forever. So 100%, he's gonna play this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm going to say 80% because I could see a scenario where the holdout's done and then he finally comes back to training camp and then he like tears his ACL or something like that and gets some dumb injury because he is kind of injury prone. So it might not be directly just the holdout, but it could also be an injury thing. So, but yeah, unless there's any other Viking stuff, Ryan, what's your overall grade of their offseason headed into this year?
I'm gonna give them B-. They didn't really make any big moves signing anyone. Tazi Sharp's like at best below average wide receiver 3. Michael Pierce was a good signing, but other than that, they lost a ton. They didn't really replace him with anybody else in free agency. Did have a lot of draft selections. Justin Jefferson and Gladney, Dantzler, those are kind of the 3 that stick out to me. Everyone else, you kind of have to wait and see how they turn out. So I would go B- right now.
Yeah, I'll give him a C plus. Losing a lot, losing Diggs and Waynes and Griffin. Those are the 3 big losses from in the offseason. But they were able to re-sign Anthony Harris, so I'm going to give them credit there. I like their draft, especially up at the top. They had a lot of lotto picks at the end, so hopefully a couple of them will pay off for the Vikings. And them losing a lot is going to make it tough for them to have a high ceiling this year. But I think this is a safe bet for 9-win football team. So I'll give them a C plus in terms of the draft.
I agree with you, Chris. I'm gonna say C plus. I thought they had a really nice draft, especially with how many picks they had. They just bring a lot of kind of young talent there. It kind of makes up for at least some of the issues they had signing players and maybe acquiring people through trades. But like you said, like you guys both said, they lost a lot, especially with Diggs, Waynes, and Griffin. So C plus. I still think they might be the best team in this division, but of course we'll kind of jump into our record predictions and standing predictions there after we go through each team. But next team we're talking about is the team that I think the 3 of us might be the most excited to talk about out of the NFC North. It is, of course, the Detroit Lions, our hometown team. Sadly, we are all fans of this team, so I know we're really excited to dive in here. So they're coming off a 2019 season that was very disappointing, to say the least. They actually kind of got off to a relatively good start, but once Stafford went down with an injury, it just kind of was all downhill from there. They ended up 3-12-1, and of course missed the playoffs. Bob Quinn, though, was really busy in the offseason. He added Desmond Trufant, the cornerback, linebacker Jamie Collins Sr., defensive tackle Danny Shelton, offensive tackle Hala Pulavati Vaitai, safety Duron Harmon, defensive end Nick Williams, quarterback Chase Daniel, safety Jaron Kearse, cornerback Darrell Roberts, linebacker Reggie Ragland, wide receiver Geronimo Allison, and linebacker Elijah Lee. However, although they did add a ton of pieces, they did lose a ton as well, most notably star cornerback Darius Slay to the Eagles in that trade right before the draft. They also lost guard Graham Glasgow to the Broncos. They elected to not re-sign defensive tackle Snacks Air Harrison. They lost edge rusher Devin Kennard to the Cardinals, offensive tackle Rick Renner to the Packers, defensive tackle Ashawn Robinson to the Rams. Backup quarterback Jeff Driscoll to the Broncos. I know we're really going to miss him. Cornerback Rashawn Melvin to the Jaguars, and punter Sam Martin, Lions legend Sam Martin, to the Denver Broncos. However, the benefits of having a terrible 2019 season, they had a really high picks in the draft, and in the first round with the third overall pick, they took Jeff Okudah, the cornerback out of Ohio State, to fill that hole that is left by Slay's departure. They then got arguably the best running back in the draft in the second round with DeAndre Swift out of Georgia, and in the third round, they spent both their third round picks on Julian Okwara, linebacker out of Notre Dame, and Jonah Jackson, the guard out of Ohio State. Obviously, this is a team that we're all very passionate about. So, Ryan, how about you start us off here? Do you think the moves the Lions made will it maybe make them a wild card contender, maybe a dark horse NFC North title contender, or do you think that might be another year of 3 to 5 wins?
No, because just making a couple moves isn't going to make a team that is top to bottom organization to players awful. No. This team is not even close to making the playoffs. I could see them winning maybe 2 more games this season with the additions they made, but oh my God, this roster just top to bottom, especially on the defensive side of the ball, is awful. You're talking about, I think it was the 31st defense in the NFL last year in terms of like total yards and total points per game. So
Horrendous. It was
I
so
think it's
bad.
going to be another awful year for the Lions. Maybe, like I said, 2 or 3 more wins at most. So I don't know what you think, Chris, but
Ah, man, dark days in Detroit Lions history. There is a little bit of optimism with this rookie class. I did think they did a really good job in the draft this year. I will say Okudah was kind of a no-brainer pick. I really wanted to take 2, obviously, but Okudah was the guy that everybody knew was going to Detroit, and he's going to be a very good player. I don't think he's going to be Slay this year, but I think in a couple years he could be just as good as him. Swift is also another guy I really like. I'm excited to see. I think he has a 3-down skill set. I'm really excited to see how he works with Stafford and then carry on as well. And Okwara and Jackson could also be very good players. But I feel like their free agent signings were a bunch of Patriots players and washed up has-beens. That's kind of how I look at it. Desmond Trufant, he used to be a pretty good corner. I do think he's all right, but I don't think he's a fantastic player. He's fine, whatever on him. Collins, he was making $1 million last year. Now he's making $11 million. That's just the Lions difference right there. Taking a above 30-year-old linebacker from the Patriots, and he probably won't even be that good. So I'm excited to see how that works. Probably won't work. Danny Shelton was a pretty good pickup. I do kind of like him. He's a pretty good run stopper. And then paying Big V over $10 million to be a backup O tackle in his entire career in Philly is just an absolute travesty. That might be one of the worst signings in the offseason and one of the worst signings in Lions history. That dude, I mean, he was just so bad in terms of pass blocking. He's a decent run blocker. I will admit that. I think he was in the top 15 in terms of run blocking, but pass blocking, he was like he graded out as one of the worst pass blocking offensive linemen in the entire league. So that's going to be a disaster. I don't know. They're going to win a few more games this year, but I'm not super optimistic about their chances to win this division or even come close to it.
You guys all raised some really great and logical points, but I'll tell you what, every year, head into the season, the Lions, they make a few moves, and I watch some videos, and I start buying in, and then like down the stretch, they just let me down every season. They let me down every season. But guess what? This year is no different. I am drinking the Kool-Aid. The Lions are going to the playoffs again. Here we go. Okay. Like, yeah, they lost Darius Slay, but was he even really that good last year? He was just whining to the media nonstop, and he just kept demanding a trade, and it was irritating. And I was done with it. And he was barely on the field too. And they added some pieces that I think could rebound. I mean, Trufant, Collins, Shelton, Harmon. You could, maybe they have some bounce back years. They're pretty good. Who knows? Geronimo Allison, not a scrub at wide receiver. Jeff Okudah, maybe
he is a scrub at wide receiver.
He's a wide receiver 3 at best, man.
Jeff Okudah could be the defensive rookie of the year, right? He could fill in for Slay. Like I said, Slay wasn't even that great this year. Okudah could be 2019, 2020 level Slay this year. That's right, I said it. And DeAndre Swift, he's a good running back. I think he's Alvin Kamara light out of the backfield, okay? I think he could be a really good running back this year. And Okwara, I think he's a really good pick. And I don't know. I'm drinking the Kool-Aid. If Stafford is healthy all year, I think Stafford could be a dark horse MVP candidate as he leads the Lions back to the playoffs. Now, am I being completely illogical right now? Of course I am. But it's what is it? It's June 20th. It's time to be optimistic about the Lions. And I think especially with the expanded playoff field this year, assuming we play football, I think the Lions could maybe sneak into that 6th or 7th spot. in the playoffs. And we already mentioned
geez.
with these teams in the NFC North, we haven't gotten to the Packers yet, but they got a lot of infighting, a lot of drama going on there. The Vikings, we already kind of talked about that. We don't really love their team. They didn't really make any big moves. Like one or two things go wrong for the Vikings or the Packers, and the Lions, things fall their way, which of course that never happens for the Lions. They could realistically maybe even win the NFC North. But I think that's a little too far, but I think they're definitely a wild card contender this year.
All right, so I think
Oh.
you're drinking the Kool-Aid again this year. This is like drinking Kool-Aid after watching someone pour poison into it. This is just an absolute disastrous take by you. One of the worst ones I've heard by you. This is not a wild card team. Um, you said they picked up a bunch of guys that could bounce back. You know, these guys they could be in a wheelchair by the end of this year. These guys are all old, washed up, past 30 Patriots that I'm not expecting them to be anything more than league average players at best. And you're saying Geronimo Allison's out here as a good receiver. This is a team with a pretty good receiving core to begin with. He's not even going to sniff their top three receiving options. He's going to be a bench piece at best. Maybe if two guys go down as injury, he can catch a few balls here and there. If you're banking on players like Chase Daniel, Daron Harmon, Darryl Roberts, Reggie Ragland to lead this team to the promised land, you're sorely mistaken, man. Losing out on Slay, yeah, I mean, I agree that Okuda could be way better than him even. I'm expecting him to be really good, but I don't think it's going to happen this year. I think it's rookie cornerbacks don't have a really good track record of just being absolute shutdown guys right in the beginning of their careers. So I think it's going to take them a year or two to get up to that top 5 level we're expecting. And Swift as Alvin Kamara light, yeah, come on, man. Like he's good, but Kamara's one of the best backs in the league. I'm not expecting Swift to be quite that. I think he'll be good, but I think it's going to take him some time to develop. But you're just I think you're drinking a little bit too much before the show today, Drew. Yeah, that was an interesting take by you.
Yeah, Drew, are you forgetting that this was the worst defense in the NFL last year? I mean,
Second
like
worst,
Chris
second
said,
worst.
these are washed up. Drew Collins. I mean, the only bright spot you could say is probably Shelton. He's a decent player. He's not great. I mean, Chase Daniel's a solid backup, but like Chris said, I disagree with Chris. I think Allison will probably be the wide receiver 3, but he's nothing special. You lost your best corner. You guys are talking about Swift being great. I mean, how is he going to get anywhere when you don't have an offensive line? You lost your best guard, your best offensive lineman in Graham Glasgow. You can't run the ball when you don't have a good offensive line. So I think that's all for naught. And then when are we going to stop drafting running backs, especially from the SEC? That has not worked out for us this past decade. So I don't know why we keep doing it. So
Look, like I said, you guys make good points, okay? But all I'm saying is I'm looking at this NFC, right? I'm looking at the NFC. They all got issues. Each of these teams, there's not like there's like a clear-cut division winner for I think pretty much every division, but like you're telling me the Lions couldn't be better than the Eagles this year? I think they could.
No.
The Falcons, they could be better than the Falcons. Could they be better than the Rams and the Cardinals? They could be better than the Rams and the Cardinals. I think that they could even be better than the Packers and the Vikings. We haven't even talked about them yet. I don't know. Like, am I going to look like an idiot in a couple months? Of course I am, because that's just how every Lions fan looks who's optimistic about this team. But I feel like that this offense could be really good this year. I mean, if Stafford stays healthy, look at their wide receiving core. We haven't even mentioned Kenny Galladay, one of the best receivers in the league. And if you don't know my opinions on him, just check out our NFL skills player draft, and you can see how I feel about him. But then we got Marvin Jones, who's a wide receiver too. I mean, he's a pretty good option at wide receiver too. Danny Amendola is getting up there in age, but still not a terrible receiver. And Geronimo Allison, like he's one of the best Packers receivers last year, in my opinion, which isn't saying much. Is outside of Devontae Adams, they really don't have a lot of outside receiving options. But him as a wide receiver 4, I think, is not that terrible. And I don't know. I like this team, and I feel cautious. And also, I didn't even mention TJ Hawkinson. Are you really expecting him to be any worse than he was last year? I mean, he was awful. And I think that in his second year, he could rebound and be a good player. And the defense definitely raises some concerns. If they can stay healthy and maybe have one more good year in them, for a lot of these guys who are kind of getting up there in age, and as you guys eloquently put it, are washed up, who knows? But I just feel like there's tons of unknowns. Every one of these teams in the NFC, aside from like the top dogs in each division, and even some of the top dogs, especially in NFC North, the Packers and Vikings, they both have some serious question marks, and they could fall off. And I think with Stafford too, he is, in my opinion, the best quarterback in this division, and it's a quarterback league. And if he can stay healthy, I mean, there's no reason he can't lead us to at least the 7th seed in the NFC playoffs.
See, I agree that Stafford's a really good quarterback. He's been injured the last 2 seasons. He's missed a lot of games in the last few years with this back injury. Can you really rely on him for 16 healthy games this season? I'm really not sure about that. And yeah, this offense could be good with him at quarterback, but if they have to rely on Chase Daniel, who is just another guy at backup quarterback, you're not really going to get much from him, and it's just going to be the same story as last year's defense is so horrendously bad, and they're really not going to be that much better this year because they did lose a lot of pieces. You have to factor in Snacks Harrison, Devon Kennard, those are even Ashawn Robinson, another guy that is at least an average defender in this league. And those are guys you have to replace, and you're replacing them with just absolute, like, very old veteran Patriots players that are on the end of their production platform, I guess you could say.
I go back to, sorry to cut you off there, but I just have to throw this point in here real quick. I go back to Slay and Snacks were barely on the field last year, and you're replacing them with at least players who can at least play. Like, I know Slay was good like 2 years ago, but last year he spent more time whining, complaining in the media than he did actually playing football on the field. And even when he played, he really wasn't even that great. And I think 2020 Jeff Okudah, is he going to be as good as 2017 or 2018 Slay this year? No. But I think he could be as good, if not better, than what Slay put on the field last year in 2019. So I mean, Slay, we like to put these goggles on like he's the best cornerback in the league. And I'm pretty sure I probably said that during our Eagles breakdown when we did the NFC East. But last year, he was not that great. I mean, on the field, he was pretty good, but he was off the field a lot. He was injured. He was complaining. I think we get that kind of drama out of the locker room, and we just bring Okudah in here, who, by all accounts, he's just saying the right things right now, but it seems like he's happy to be here. And same with Harrison. I mean, we didn't really, I guess we got Shelton, right? We did kind of replace him. Flowers, maybe he has a bounce back year this year. And I don't know. I just like this team, and I feel like Okudah can easily fill the hole that 2019 Darius Slay left.
Geez, man, you're just one of these sick Lions fans that keeps buying in every season. Another one of these guys that just loves the Lions and expects them to bounce back. And I'm sick of it, man. Matt Patricia can't get it done. Bob Quinn can't get it done. They need to be bad again this year. I actually want them to be bad again this year, so those two can get out of here. They can take their bags and they can fly to New England and have fun there. Maybe they can get their jobs back and they can beg for their jobs with Bill Belichick because they're not keeping it here. These two are just they're bottom of the barrel GM and head coach, and I'm sick of them. I'm ready for them to get out of town, and I'm ready for a new era of Lions football to probably stink again, but at least give us some level of excitement. Because I have none for Matt Patricia. I have no patience for that bum. That guy's defense was 31st in the league last year, 31st, and they lost a lot of pieces like. And all they added was Patriots. How is this defense going to be any better than maybe bottom 7 in the league, which I fully expect them to be in the bottom 7 again?
Yeah, like Chris said, the only good thing about this season is that Patricia and Bob Quinn are going to get canned at the end of it. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's the only thing you can look forward to.
I can't wait.
You guys are just haters, and you're pessimistic about this team. And I apologize for being an optimist. Okay, I take full responsibility.
Won 3 games last year, dude.
That's before Stafford went down. And if Stafford doesn't go down, he'll be fine. And even if Stafford does go down, there are 2 starting caliber quarterbacks out there on the free agent market right now that we can just go ahead and sign. Cam Newton, Colin Kaepernick, they're better than Chase Daniel. I can tell you that right now. So if Stafford goes down, throw one of those guys in there, and this offense just keep on rolling. And yeah, the defense, is there some problems there? Yes. But they they got a new defensive coordinator there. I think Patricia seems maybe he's kind of got humbled. I mean, he's going to be fighting for his job. Martha Ford did that press release after the season and saying we're making the playoffs or else. So I think he's hungry this year. Do I think Patricia's a great coach? No, I do not. And I think if anybody else is coaching this team, I feel like we'd all be like, okay, this team could be a borderline playoff team. But because he's probably coaching this team, it's definitely raises some concerns. I honestly think Bob Quinn isn't a terrible GM. If you look at some of the moves he's made, I mean, they're not terrible moves. It's just the one crappy, really terrible move he made was hiring Matt Patricia as his head coach. Let's just be honest. But I think Patricia, he knows it's make or break this year. I think he's going to lay it all out there, and I think that it might just pay off. Who knows? Again, I'm saying all this crap, and in week 1, Stafford's probably going to go down with an injury, and all this will go for naught, and they're going to go like 1-15. But the fact of the matter is, like I said, it's June 20th. I'm going to be depressed the entire season as a Lions fan. I might as well be happy and optimistic right now because I feel like there are some things about this team that to like, especially with the offense. Even because look at Kerryon Johnson, if he stays healthy, even if he doesn't stay healthy, I like DeAndre Swift a lot more than Kerryon. So I don't know. I like this team. I look at the other teams, the NFC. They all have some concerns. If a few things go the Lions' way, they can easily make the playoffs, in my opinion. And if you look at ESPN, you look at all the things, all the experts, quote unquote experts. A lot of them are pretty divided on the Lions too, kind of like we are. It seems like there's some people that think they're going to go 2-15, or yeah, wait, no, that's not the math. 2-14, or they're going to go like 9-7. Maybe I've seen some that are saying like 10-6 and make it one of those wild card spots. So
Apparently, those people are just ingesting paint fumes at this point because those people are absolutely ridiculous, and it's not going to happen this year, man. It's going to be another year of below mediocrity for the Lions, and it's going to all crumble. I think the thing I'm most excited for this team this year is that they play the Jacksonville Jaguars at some point, and then it's going to basically be the fight for. It could be the fight for the first overall pick.
They're not that bad.
They
The
can play
Lions are
them again
not
this
that
year.
bad.
We'll
Like,
see, man. I could definitely see a world where they're a 2-win football team and they're fighting with Jacksonville and Washington for that first overall pick and maybe getting Trevor Lawrence next year. How does that sound, Drew? Trevor Lawrence next season. Let's do it.
Trevor Lawrence would be great. And again, if they suck this year and they're 2-14 or 3-13 or 3-12-1 like they were last year, great. We can get a good pick. Patricia will probably see the door. But I think this team is not that bad. They have a relatively tough schedule because they play in a good division, but it's also a fourth place schedule. Like you said, they play the Jaguars. They play the Falcons, who I don't know how you guys feel about the Falcons, but I'm not completely sold on the Falcons. They play the Redskins, the Panthers, even the Texans. They lost Hopkins. The Titans, who knows? Like, there's some teams in here that they can win some games, and I think in comparison to the other, I think they're better than the Bears, in my opinion. We'll get to the Bears a little bit later, but I think they can beat the Packers. They almost beat the Packers last year. They would have beat the Packers last year had it not been for the refs. So I don't know. I think there's a roadmap that this team wins, 9-10 games and makes the playoffs as a wild card team, or even wins the division. Who knows? But
It's
we're
not happening.
we're spending way too much time on the Lions. I'm just on my soapbox here.
You guys are done wasting your time on a meaningless team, we could get into our fantasy player for this team and we can move on.
I was about to say that. Ryan, how about you start us off?
Obvious choice, Kenny Galladay, one of the best receivers in the league. Big red zone threat. I think if Stafford stays healthy, I think he'll have one of the best seasons, probably the best season of his career. So I'm going to go Kenny G here.
Yeah, I like the Kenny G pick. I think he's going to be a guy you can kind of draft in the second to third round, probably. That's where I would be comfortable taking him. I'm not going to overdraft him just because I'm a Lions fan. A very exciting player to own in fantasy because he can take basically any play to the house. He's going to be a guy that finishes in the back end of the wide receiver one room, so I'm comfortable drafting him there. The guy I want to address is his counterpart, Marvin Jones Jr. This is a guy you can take pretty late in your drafts, probably towards double digits rounds. It happens every year. He's an undervalued player. You can take him, put him in your flex position. He's going to give you wide receiver 2 production. He's done it for basically the past 3 seasons. You can go out and you can try to trade for him after the first couple seasons. First couple weeks. That's what I did last year. And I was able to trade for him and put him in the flex until he got hurt. He was a mainstay in my lineup, even though my team wasn't that great. But this is a guy I'm very comfortable with as a back end wide receiver 2, and you don't have to draft him for that price. I'm taking him over guys like I'm trying to think, like Justin Jefferson. I'm taking him over CeeDee Lamb. These are guys that are probably going to go before him in the rookie class because they're the new flashy, pieces on their respective teams. But I'm taking a steady veteran here for at least 1 or 2 more seasons of production. I'm gonna be confident in him as a flex play at least.
Yeah, those are both really good picks. I'm gonna go with Matthew Stafford. Of course, like we've already talked about, the injuries are a definite concern. But if you're one of those fantasy players that likes waiting late in rounds to draft a quarterback, Stafford is definitely still going to be there. He could also be has the potential to go undrafted as well. So you can kind of pick him up, check the waiver wire, and you can just pick him up anytime during the season. But we've seen in the past he is a pretty good fantasy player when healthy. And the offense was pretty good last year when he was on the field. So I think they definitely added some pieces, like I already mentioned with DeAndre Swift there, who also could be a potential fantasy player as well. So Stafford is my pick. We already know how I feel about the overall grade of the offseason, so I'm just going to get us started here. I'm just going to say a solid B+. Not enough for an A, but I like their draft. And they brought guys in, and that's what you need to do. And I know you guys think they lost a lot of pieces, but Darius Slay, and Snacks Harrison, they just didn't do a lot for me last year. Glasgow is a definite. Actually, I'm going to change my answer. I'm going to go solid B, because Glasgow was kind of a big loss on the offensive line, in my opinion. But I still think it was a decent offseason for Bob Quinn. So,
see, I would agree with you that it was a decent offseason. I probably would give them around a B minus, but the fact that they paid Vitae over $10 million a season, they get a C for me. That is just an absolute travesty. They lost Glasgow, which they could have paid a little bit less money. He's a much better guard. I know they're not the same position on the offensive line, but their offensive line's pretty bad, so that would have always been a help. I would much rather have Glasgow at guard than I would Vitae at tackle. This is a dude that was basically a backup tackle, and I think he's going to be terrible. And I'm expecting him to be just an absolute bust for them, paying him over $10 million a year. Like I said 3 other times in this segment, I'm giving him a C just because of that. And I like their draft. I didn't hate their offseason as much as I say. They did get guys like Drew said, players that can be mediocre at least. But Vitae is just an absolute travesty of a signing mistake.
Not only the Vitae signing and losing Glasgow, but I want to focus on the draft here because you have a definite offensive line need. Instead of drafting an offensive lineman in the second round, you take another running back when you already have a couple. I mean, I'd argue that running back is the most expendable position in the NFL. So I don't know why you're wasting a second round pick on another SEC running back. And then in the third round, you go and you trade up for a guard that you could go and get in the sixth round of Jonah Jackson. That just makes no sense. So you try and compensate and draft 2 offensive linemen in a row after that. They're below average that you can go and get in the 5th or 6th round. That just makes no sense to me. And like Chris said, the Vitae signing and losing Graham Glasgow, this was a bad offseason for me. I'm going to go C. Bob Quinn's going to be canned at the end of the season, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. That's for sure. I did like the Swift pick. So I will disagree with you in that regard because I think he's really talented, and they did need another back in there. But yeah, they did kind of try to compensate for the loss of Glasgow and the horrendous offensive line, but just a bunch of mid round picks and maybe some reaching on that. I don't mind Jonah Jackson there. I think maybe it was a little bit of a reach, but this is a guy that could come in and make an impact. So I'm hoping he can at least do an okay job replacing Glasgow.
yeah, I'll be honest. I wasn't crazy about Kerryon Johnson because he's always hurt. So I think if you take Swift, I think he has potential to be better than Johnson. So maybe even look at trading Johnson.
Yeah, that's fair.
And get maybe an offensive lineman. At least, because at first I was like, why are we taking Swift? But I think Johnson's expendable, and I think we should maybe, if he can stay healthy the first few weeks, maybe try and get rid of him. But that's probably more than any of our listeners want about Lions talk. But obviously, we love the Lions. At least I love the Lions, and Ryan and Chris just love to hate them. So we'll dive into our next team here, which probably had maybe the most dramatic and somewhat controversial offseason out of any team in the NFL, especially when it comes to the draft and who they specifically took with their first round pick. That's the Green Bay Packers. They're coming off a pretty good year last year. They finished 13-3, and of course got absolutely obliterated by the eventual NFC champion San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game. If you look at the advanced metrics, they really weren't as good as a 13-3 team. They were a little bit less than that, but still, 13-3 season is nothing to scoff at. In the offseason, outside the draft, they added Christian Kirksey. I know who that is. I don't know why I botched his name. Linebacker, offensive tackle Rick Wagner, wide receiver Michigan alum Devin Funchess, and defensive line Trayvon Hester. They lost, however, linebacker Blake Martinez to the Giants, offensive tackle Brian Balaga, one of my favorite names in the NFL, to the Chargers. They elected not to re-sign cornerback Tremont Williams. As we already mentioned when we talked about the Lions, they lost wide receiver Geronimo Allison to Detroit. Tight end Jimmy Graham to the Bears, outside linebacker Kyle Fackrell to the Giants, and then linebacker B.J. Goodson to the Browns. In the draft, as I alluded to at the top, they took maybe the most talked about 26th pick in NFL draft history, Jordan Love, the quarterback out of Utah State, the heir apparent, it seems like, to Aaron Rodgers. And then the second round, they took A.J. Dillon, the running back out of Boston College. And in the third round, they took Josiah DeGuara, the tight end out of Cincinnati. So guys, like I said, the Packers made a lot of moves, made a lot of noise here in the offseason, somewhat controversially. Rodgers, of course, said he wanted a wide receiver in the draft, and what they get him? They got him a quarterback and a running back and a tight end, I guess. But do you think the Packers did enough to maybe win the division again, or do you think they maybe take a step back this year?
So I'll jump into this because I'm pretty passionate about this one, and I'm sure you're gonna like my take on this one. The only reason they did enough to kind of capture the to win the division again is just because they were a pretty good team before this. They didn't do anything in the offseason. This is I'm gonna give you my grade right now. They got an F for me. This is the worst offseason. It's so bad, dude. Okay, so you're taking Jordan Love in the first round. They traded up to go get Jordan Love, which is Aaron Rodgers' replacement. I mean, if he's good, he's good. It's a similar move to Brett Favre when Aaron Rodgers got drafted. So I mean,
I don't think it is, but we'll get into that in a second. Sorry to cut you off.
maybe that works out for him. But you draft in the second round. This is a terrible pick. AJ Dillon in the second round. This is a guy they're drinking a running back after already having Aaron Jones. He's a top 10 back in this league. He's a very very talented running back. A guy that should pay next year, even though they're probably not going to. Dillon is a guy that he can't catch passes. He's not fast. He's a bruising running back that's probably going to get the ball way more than he should. He reminds me of like a 35-year-old Frank Gore, but he's what 23, 24, something like that. This guy already has a lot of tread on the tires. He's basically had about the same amount of carries as Jonathan Taylor, but he's like a third of the player. So taking him in the second round is an absolute travesty and such a disastrous, just a disastrous move. Losing Brian Bulaga is another move that I'm concerned about. I think this is a pretty talented player. This is a guy that the Chargers are going to love next year. Blake Martinez also a plus running back, so that's going to be a big loss as well. And they really didn't add anything in the offseason. I mean, Rick Wagner, not a bad signing, probably their best move in the entire offseason, but he's just kind of a mediocre tackle. He's all right. But yeah, this is just they're going to take a step back. They're probably still going to win this division because Rodgers, I think he's going to be a pretty good quarterback this year again, and I think he's going to throw a lot of touchdowns to a healthy Devontae Adams. But I think this is one of the worst off seasons in recent history. F for me already, giving you that.
Well, like Chris said, this team pretty much stayed put, if not took a step back. I mean, you throw in Devin Funchess for Geronimo Allison, wide receiver 3 for wide receiver 3. Like Chris mentioned, losing Balaga really hurts. I mean, he was a really good protector. Aaron Rodgers really got up there in the run game. I think that's really going to hurt him. But I mean, I look at these departures and additions, nothing really major besides that. Like Chris said, they did not have a very good draft. I don't know why. I mean, I personally would have taken a wide receiver too, maybe T. Higgins there. And like Chris said, it does not make sense to draft a running back like A.J. Dillon in the second round, especially when you haven't drafted a receiver yet. So I'm not going to give them an F, but I think they kind of stayed put where they're already a good team, so I think they're going to win the division again. But this was not a great offseason for Green Bay.
Terrible. So bad, dude.
See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, though. Not to go back to the Lions, but like we're just crapping on the Packers right now. And like the Lions had it. I mean, Chris, you just said F, right? The Lions at least had an average offseason. Like there's a chance. Anyway, we're not going down this rabbit hole again. Sticking with the Packers, though, I 100% agree with you guys. Aaron Rodgers, as we all probably know at this point, he's got a bit of an ego. He's kind of a bit of a diva. And just drafting he was on some radio show before the draft saying, "Oh man, I can't wait till we get a receiver in the first round." And the Packers, they don't even take a receiver; they take his replacement in the first round, and they don't even just take him with their actual pick; they trade up to get him at pick 26, which is just insane. And you mentioned there, Chris, how it's kind of very similar to when the Packers took Aaron Rodgers when they still had Brett Favre back. I believe it was 2005. I want to say. It's a little bit different though because Aaron Rodgers could have been the first overall pick that year, and it just kind of the way it fell was that he fell all the way down to I think it was 25 or 26. I think it was in that draft. But it was Aaron Rodgers or Alex Smith, and then everybody after that they just didn't need a quarterback, and that's why the Packers got Aaron Rodgers. But look at Jordan Love though. I mean, yeah, everyone's like, oh, he's Patrick Mahomes light. He's the next Patrick Mahomes, this, that, and the other thing. But he did not have a good year last year for Utah State, and it's just that he was. People were thinking about him possibly being like a round 2, round 3 kind of guy in some mock drafts I saw. So trading up to get him, it just doesn't really make any sense. It's not really the same thing as it was with the Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre that happened over a decade ago now. And also taking A.J. Dillon in the second round. I know I defended the Lions taking DeAndre Swift in the second round, who's a running back. But Swift, he was clearly, in my opinion, it was either him or Edwards-Helaire that was the best running back in the draft. A.J. Dillon, though, I mean, they already got 2 solid running backs in Aaron Jones, and even Jamal Williams has his moments, right? And when they need a receiver, and I don't think Denzel Mims was still available at that. I think he went just before that pick. But Denzel Mims, T. Higgins, those are 2 guys they could have taken with their first pick. Just an overall, just atrocious offseason. I guess they got Devin Funchess, who's shown flashes of being a quality NFL player, but
No.
Can't catch a
and
cold.
I don't hate Rick Wagner or Christian Kirksey, but I don't know. Just overall, just not a good offseason. I feel like they definitely maybe created some drama issues that could sprout up during the actual season.
This team is just, they could have found a way to improve this team, drafting a wide receiver up at this spot. Yeah, even taking a guy like Denzel Mims, which I saw mocked. I know he didn't go until like the second round, but I would have been willing to take him here in the first round with that pick. I just can't believe they traded up to get Jordan Love, man. I mean, yeah, it could pay off in a few years. I don't really think Jordan Love is that great, kind of like what Drew was saying. That's why I didn't really get to I didn't touch up on it as much as I should have. But yeah, those 2 first round picks are just they're going to prove to be absolutely detrimental to this team. I do think this team is going to win the division, but I don't think it's going to be with a commanding force. And I kind of do see what Drew's saying, where teams did take a step back. I'm really not optimistic on it, even when we get into the Bears. I'm going to give you a pretty low grade for them as well, because I think they had a terrible offseason. But I really just don't think the Lions had a lot of talent on the roster to begin with, whereas like the Packers have guys like Jair Alexander, Devontae Adams. Those are just a couple names.
Kenny Clark.
Their linebacking core with the Smith brothers. They're not actually brothers.
Yeah.
They're a duo, I guess you could say. But there's just players on the Lions that don't kind of have that edge to them, and I think that's why the Packers are still going to be a pretty good football team this year.
Yeah, real quick, back to the Jordan Love pick. Why are you? That's a pick for the future. This is the team that needs to win now, especially with Aaron Rodgers' age. Why are you, picking someone for the future? You need to win now. Get a wide receiver. Get T. Higgins. Get Denzel Mims. That's going to help you win now. You can't.
Yeah.
I just don't get that pick at all.
Well, and also, like, if you wanted to get a quarterback, because they kind of needed a backup quarterback, right? And I think competition is healthy. But they could have waited and got maybe Jake Fromm, a young quarterback, later. I don't think he's as good as Jordan Love, but they could have just drafted him if they wanted to draft a young quarterback for Rodgers to kind of tutor or mentor, or even the guy from Washington that I'm completely just blanking on his name right now. Yeah, he also dropped in the draft. So we can just kind of just keep overstating this over and over again, but Jordan Love in the first round, drafting up or trading up to get him does not make any sense, in my opinion, at least. Especially when they need a wide receiver. Of course, they got one of the best in the game in Adams, but then outside of that, I mean, there's not a lot there. And I think I also saw some mocks had them taking Denzel Mims, who I think is a really good quarterback, really good wide receiver. So I don't know. It just, and then taking a running back with your second round pick also doesn't really make any sense.
And that running back, to be exact, maybe not a running back, because they could have used another guy around Aaron Jones, because I don't think Jamal Williams is anything special, but Dylan is not that guy. He's I think they reached on him a lot. I don't think this is a very good. I don't think this is a very highly touted prospect, and I think a lot of the experts have kind of trashed him for that pick almost just as much as Jordan Love.
Do you think maybe drafting Dylan kind of foreshadows that they're not going to re-sign Jones? They're just going to let him walk?
Yeah, it does, and it's pretty sad to me. I think Jones is a lot better player than AJ Dillon ever will be, and I think he's a guy you pay $9 to $10 million for. I think he's a guy that makes a big impact. I mean, what did he have? 16 rushing touchdowns last season or something like that. He was one of the best running backs in the league last season, and I think he's going to be really good again this year. He's going to be a really solid back in this backfield, and I don't get it. I think he's going to find another home. I actually kind of predict Aaron Jones' destination for next year. I think he's going to land with the Falcons. I don't think Gurley's going to stay. I don't think he's going to stick long term. I think the Falcons will be willing to pay him $9 to $10 million to be a really good running back there, and I'm not positive of that, but I'm definitely like, if that happened, I'd be definitely excited for them.
Yeah, their defense isn't terrible though, and like you guys have mentioned, they did have a lot. They did have talent on the team already, and they didn't really lose a ton of guys for the most part, at least. And they did add some decent options there in free agency, and but their draft, just to kind of completely missed out on the draft, just really kind of does not work for me.
Struck out on the draft.
And I think, I don't know, even their offense. I mean, who outside of Adams, who are they going to throw to? Like, that's a serious question.
All right, so I kind of want to regrade them. I'll give them a D- because they did cut Jimmy Graham. He stinks. So yeah, good thing they got rid of him. They can actually use Jay Sternberger, which I think he's a more talented tight end. So that's a guy I could actually see getting having a bigger impact this year. I think Rodgers is gonna like him this year for sure. But yeah, Graham sucks. So I'll give him a D- just because they got rid of him. He's one of the worst tight ends in the league now.
They also signed or they got Mercedes Lewis too. He's still on the team.
Oh wow!
So,
38-year-old
I'm
Mercedes
just saying,
Benz. Yeah.
I'm looking at their depth chart, and he's listed as the tight end 1. So I'm just
Well, he won't be. Sternberger should be.
I did want to pose this question to you guys, and then maybe we can conclude our Packers talk. But Aaron Rodgers, how do you think maybe he will kind of surprise everybody and be a good mentor to Jordan Love, or do you think that he might be out on his way out the door here in a season or two, kind of like we saw with Peyton Manning towards the end of his end of his career, and Tom Brady this past off season? What are you guys expecting?
I think he's out the door in a couple of years. I think he'll be fine this year. I don't think he's going to say a lot because he really hasn't said a ton since the pick. I think he's kind of just vented in private almost. I'm sure he's had his fun just throwing stuff around in his own house or something like that. But he hasn't been as vocal as I thought he was going. I thought he was going to be, yeah, I want out, but he hasn't done that yet. So I think he'll have a couple more seasons, and then he's gonna ask once he really declines, which he already kind of has started that downfall a little bit. He's gonna get out, and he's gonna have one more run with another team. I think that's how the rest of his career is gonna go.
Yeah, and I think he already said like he's not like obliged to mentor him. I mean, he's right. He doesn't have to mentor this guy. It's not his job to do so. And I don't see Aaron Rodgers as the guy going out of his way to be nice to mentor this guy, especially after they drafted him, traded up to pick him. So I think, like Chris said, I think he's out the door in a few years.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I think it might be sooner than a couple years. I think we might be looking at like summer 2021. He's gets a big blockbuster trade because I believe Brett Favre said a few maybe like a month ago now said something about how because the two of them are kind of friends now, even though they of course were not friends when they were teammates in Green Bay. And he said I guess he was talking to Rodgers, and Rodgers is kind of he does kind of want out, I guess, or he's ready to leave, he's ready to move on. And I think you kind of mentioned there, Chris, where you think Aaron Jones might end up. I think Rodgers might end up with the Broncos. I mentioned Peyton Manning there a little bit earlier, but
I can
we'll probably
see
talk more about Drew Lock and the Broncos when we do the AFC West. But I think they got a lot of good weapons there, and the really only question mark is that quarterback. So maybe John Elway swings a huge trade and gets Aaron Rodgers in the orange and navy blue. Who knows? But
yeah, that's definitely an interesting proposal there. Do we have anything else on the Packers?
No, I think let's jump into our fantasy studs for this team. I think Ryan went first with the Lions. So Chris, how about you go first with the Packers?
I'm going to go ahead and address Davante Adams. I'll go with the obvious choice here. There's not a ton of fantasy value on this team besides their running back 1, quarterback 1, wide receiver 1. So I'll go with Davante Adams. I think this is the second best receiver or second best fantasy receiver in the league for sure on that. I think he's going to have a really big bounce back season. I know he had some injuries last year, kind of burned some people, but he was a target machine when he came back. I think he averaged like 11 targets a game or something like that. And he's such a good red zone threat. And this is a guy that, Ryan definitely liked him in our other when we did the draft for sure. Not to spoil too much or anything, but Adams is a guy that he's going to be a big red zone target. I think he's one of the best red zone receivers in the league, and I think he's going to catch at least 11 touchdown passes this year, along with probably around 1,300 yards. So this is a guy I definitely want to draft this year in the back of the first round. Maybe pairing him with one of those late first round running backs like Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon. I would not be upset at all to come out with Joe Mixon and Davante Adams in that turn pick.
Yeah, that's a solid pick because outside of Adams, we mentioned it. I mean, he's not going to be targeting Lazard or Marquez Valdez-Scantling a lot in the red zone. It's going to be Jones and Davante Adams. I'm going to actually go with Aaron Jones. He's kind of a touchdown machine. Chris mentioned it last year. I think 16 touchdowns. Great on the ground, great out of the backfield, catching the ball. Very, very explosive, elusive player. I think he's going to have another solid year for Green Bay.
Yeah, I like Aaron Jones too. I think he's going to take a little bit of a step back because he was so efficient last season in the red zone. I think he's going to end up with like around 13 total touchdowns. I think he actually had 19 because I think he had 3 through the air as well as 16 on the ground. I think he's going to take a little step back in that regard because he didn't have a crazy amount of yards. This is a guy I definitely want to draft as like a low-end RB1, high-end RB2, but I think you can get him in the second to third round because people are kind of fading him. I still like him a lot for this year because, like I said, A.J. Dillon, not very talented. I don't think he's going to do a whole lot besides maybe steal a few touchdowns. I still like Aaron Jones a lot this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Chris, because with Aaron Jones, there's some worry about some fall off here because he was heavily touchdown dependent, especially in respect to fantasy last year. So there might be a little bit of regression, but if you can, don't take him like first round, but if he's there like late second round, third round, maybe even early fourth, definitely.
I'd be absolutely happy to take him there for sure. That's a very good point there, Drew.
Yeah, because there is some worry there about maybe some tail off. But Matt LaFleur, he is a good offensive coach. We kind of saw that last year. I mean, I know I kind of mentioned it that they maybe weren't as good on paper as a 13-win team, but they still won 13 games. So you gotta respect that. And Aaron Rodgers, even though he's old, he's still a good quarterback, and that kind of segues into my pick is Aaron Rodgers. As Chris mentioned, there's really 3 legit fantasy options on this team, and we mentioned all 3 of them. Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to say kind of the same thing that I say about Stafford. I feel like people are kind of out on Rodgers, especially with them drafting Jordan Love and the expectations of there's going to be drama here in 2020. So if he kind of drops, I think you could get him if you want to wait on your quarterback. He'd still be available late in the rounds or maybe even go undrafted. I don't really see that happening because Rodgers is still a big name, so I think he's going to get drafted. But if he's available there late in your draft, definitely take him. And he can. I think as I mentioned in our QB rankings video, I said that Aaron Rodgers, I think, might have one more good season in him, like elite level season in him. And I think if you take him there for your fantasy team, he could really pay off. So I think he's frustrated, as Chris said, he's throwing stuff in his house, I guess, reportedly according to Chris. So I think he's motivated and he's going to play really well, and it's going to really pay off for your fantasy team. So, but yeah, I think those 3 guys: Jones, Rodgers, Adams. Those are the 3.
Yep.
Good fantasy options you can take, and they're all really good. I mean, look in comparison to other teams, those are 3 legit fantasy options. So, Chris, you already kind of broke down your grade. You gave him an F for the offseason. Do you want to break that down anymore, or do you want to just?
No.
All right, Ryan,
Yeah.
what's your grade?
I'm gonna go C-, just because the draft was awful. First 2 picks were awful, and like I said, in free agency, they kind of stayed put. They didn't really make any big splashes at any additions, and I don't know, just kind of a terrible offseason, like Chris said.
Yeah, I'll just go in between you guys. I'm gonna go D. I think this might be the lowest grade I've given to any of the teams that we've done so far. I already voiced my opinion on the Jordan Love pick, and the AJ Dillon pick also didn't really make any sense to me. They lost some key guys, didn't lose a ton in comparison to some other teams, but also didn't really add all too much either. So just a D because they definitely took a step backwards. I think they're still a good team, but there's definitely some concern that they might kind of fall off and maybe not even make the playoffs this year. Who knows? But we'll get into our predictions there at the end before we talk about this final team, Da Bears, the Chicago Bears, which is Chris' favorite team. I know he loves their quarterback room. We'll probably get that into that a little bit later on. But the Bears are coming off an NFC North championship after the 2018 season, one of the best defenses in the league. And the expectations were high going into 2019, and of course they missed those completely. They finished 8-8 and missed the playoffs. And I'll be honest, I was really surprised they finished 8-8 because if you focus on like the media coverage around this team, like I thought they finished like with like 5 or 6 wins, but 8-8, I mean that's average. That's 500. That's not terrible, but still, people were expecting them to be like a 12 to 13 win team last year and maybe even contend for the Super Bowl, and they just missed out on that completely. And a big reason was because of their quarterback. And to address that, they added Nick Foles in free agency, the former quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Philadelphia Eagles. They also added edge rusher Robert Quinn, tight end Jimmy Graham, cornerback Artie Burns, strong safety Tashawn Gibson, offensive line Jermaine Ethety, offensive line outside linebacker Barcavius Mingo. That's also a great name. Wide receiver Ted Ginn Jr., defensive tackle John Jenkins, and wide receiver Trevor Davis. They did lose quite a bit of pieces as well. They lost cornerback Prince Amukamara. Man, there's just awesome names in this NFC North. So the Las Vegas Raiders, wide receiver Taylor Gabriel, who they elected not to re-sign. Linebacker Nick Kwiatkowski. I don't know. Hopefully I said that right. To the Las Vegas Raiders. Edge rusher Leonard Floyd to the Rams. Safety HaHa Clinton Dix to the Cowboys. Longtime guard Kyle Long retired. They lost both quarterback Chase Daniel and defensive end Nick Williams to the Lions, and then they lost tight end Trey Burton to the Indianapolis Colts. Then in the draft, they did not have a first-round pick because I believe that was their last first-round pick that they did in the Khalil Mack trade. So they had 2 second-round picks, though, and they took tight end Cole Kmet out of Notre Dame and cornerback Jalen Johnson out of Utah. They also had 3 fifth-round picks, but I won't really go into detail with those guys unless you feel like you guys all want to go over them in more detail. But Ryan, we'll start with you again. The Bears, they are probably maybe the least interesting team, at least from our perspective, out of these 4 teams. Do you think they did enough in the offseason to maybe return to that 2018 glory they had, or do you think they might maybe even be more of a 5-6 win team this year?
definitely a 5 or 6 win team this year, no matter who's Trubisky or Foles. I mean, that's just a quarterback circus. I know my good pal Chris is going to get into that with more detail there, but I mean, some of these guys they're signing makes no sense. Like Jimmy Graham, that's a useless signing. I know you lost Trey Burton, but why sign Jimmy Graham and then draft another tight end? That just doesn't make any sense to me. And then you go and probably get one of the worst offensive linemen on Seattle's O line. That doesn't make any sense to me. Artie Burns is a solid pickup, but I mean, other than that, nothing really jumps out to me that, like, hey, they made a good signing. No, none of that. And losing Kyle Long, that's going to hurt them a lot. He was a solid guard for many years. Losing Leonard Floyd also will hurt off the edge. Yeah.
So, Chris, do you think the Bears made enough moves to return to that 2018 form, or do you think that they might be more of a cellar dweller team than even they were last year?
See, I think this team is going to be a little bit worse than last year, but I don't project them to be like as bad. I guess I think they're a 6 or 7 win football team. Like I don't know, their defense is still going to be pretty good this year. They do have Khalil Mack, one of the best defensive players in the league. You gotta remember that. Akeem Hicks was also out for basically the entire second half of the season. He makes a big difference on at least their run stopping ability. They started off really good in that regard last year, but then they kind of fell off once he got injured. So I think him returning back to health is a big deal. The Kyle Long retiring story, I know he's been out for so long. It would have been big to get him back this year, but him retiring, that's a big loss as well. Hot Clinton Dix and Leonard Floyd, also very solid players that I'm worried that are going to leave big holes in this team. So I don't think they had a very good draft. I mean, Cole Kmet, I think, player, and Jalen Johnson, yeah, he also could be a pretty good corner, but they didn't have very many picks because they traded basically their entire system for Khalil Mack a couple of years ago. But I think it's going to be a struggle for them in terms of just replacing all these players. And Nick Foles, he is definitely an upgrade over Mitch Trubisky, which is literally saying nothing because Mitch Trubisky is one of the worst quarterbacks in all of football, including backups. He's horrendous. Literally I wouldn't sign him to be a backup on any football team in this league. That guy sucks. Nick Foles at least is a capable backup quarterback. So as a starter, he's probably one of the worst, but maybe not the worst starter in the league. Robert Quinn also was a pretty nice addition for this team, but after that, Jimmy Graham, trash, and then you look at all the like Ted Ginn. Yeah, what are they going to do with him? That dude's like 50. So I'm just kind of I'm out on the Bears. Not quite as much as some other people. Some people are saying, oh yeah, they're just as bad as the Lions, or maybe even worse than the Lions. I'm not there yet, but I think this is also the second worst. I think this is the second worst team in the division for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm drinking the Lions Kool-Aid, and I'm drinking the Bears Kool-Aid, okay? Nick Foles, they're going to milk every ounce of Philly magic that he has left in him, and they're going to lead him. Him and Jimmy Graham are going to have a resurgent season, and they're going to lead them back to 7 wins because this team is not good. I do not like them at all. Yeah, I'm not too crazy. Their draft, they lost that first round pick, and then the second round pick they took Cole Kmet, which is a decent tight end, but it doesn't make any sense that you take Cole Kmet and then also add Jimmy Graham. That does not make any sense in my opinion. Of course, Jimmy Graham was good like 8 years ago, but now he's not great. And defensively, I mean, I think they're still a decent defense. I don't think they're as good as they were back in 2018, but Khalil Mack, I mean, he's still arguably the best defensive player in the league. So you can't,
sure.
Yeah. And I mean, Robert Quinn's not bad. I mean, they did lose some pieces on the defensive side of the ball as well, which is kind of worrisome. And you already mentioned it, Chris, the quarterback room is not good with Foles, and Trubisky, which, I'm sure we'll probably get into a little bit more detail later on, but, yeah, overall just kind of meh for me. They didn't do too much. Didn't love their draft, and I think that we already know how I feel about the Lions. I think this is clearly the worst team in the division, in my opinion.
I don't know. I mean, I think the Lions are clearly the worst division in the team, or the worst team in the division. I think the only thing that's making this Bears team better than Lions is, like Chris said, Akeem Hicks and Khalil Mack, and some of the solid pieces they have on defense. But other than that, like you guys mentioned, the QB room's a disaster. I don't even think Nick Foles can do much with this offense. I feel bad for guys like Allen Robinson.
Oh yeah,
he has not had a good quarterback at all in his NFL career. So I see this as like a 6 or 7 win team. So
yeah, that's right where I see him for sure. This is definitely the most boring team to talk about in the division because they really they really didn't do a whole lot in the offseason. They didn't have many draft picks. They really didn't sign anyone of note besides Robert Quinn and Nick Foles. They didn't lose. I mean, they lost some pieces, but they didn't lose anybody that I'm really heartbroken about, I guess. So it's kind of a boring offseason for them, and this is going to be a boring, 6-7, maybe an 8-win football team. If Foles can be some semblance of competent, maybe an 8-win football team.
Yeah, like their defense is going to win them some games. I mean, they got look at their depth chart right now. I mean, Danny Trevathan isn't terrible. Roquan Smith isn't terrible. Eddie Goldman isn't that
Roquan
bad.
Smith's a beast.
Kyle Fuller, Eddie Jackson. These are solid defensive guys, and they're going to help them definitely win some games. But when you look at the rest of this division, and it is very, very much like an offensive league. And when you have an offense that's this not great. Honestly, though, I mean, look at the running backs. Though they got David Montgomery, who's not bad. I mean, he had a kind of a tough first year last year, but I think he could rebound and have a decent year this year. And Tariq Cohen isn't a terrible second option there out of the backfield. We already mentioned Allen Robinson, who's a really good wide receiver. The other kind of receiving options aren't great, in my opinion, at least.
Anthony Miller's all right.
But you got to have someone throwing them the ball. And when those are Trubisky or Foles, I mean, that's not great. Reportedly, though, I was watching this video the other day, and Mitchell Trubisky was like, "Yeah, I'm hungry, man. I'm ready to play. This is going to be my year." And Chris, I want to hear your thoughts on that real quick.
I just think Trubisky's just trash, man. I don't know. I don't even really have any thoughts at this point. I'm just kind of sick of him. Ready for him to move. I mean, they didn't even give him his 5th-year option, so I'm kind of just he's going to be gone after this year. He's not even going to. I honestly think this would be it for him in the entire league. I don't think he could even be a backup in this league anymore. He's so bad. Like, he really does stink. And he's a hot dumpster fire of a thrower. He has a little bit of mobility, but that's about it. And he's not going to – I think Foles is going to win this job from day one. I think he's going to keep it all year, even though he's not good. And Foles is a very mediocre quarterback, but compared to Trubisky, Allen Robinson is going to love Nick Foles. He's going to absolutely adore him, but he's still playing with bad quarterback play. So I don't know. I definitely feel bad for Robinson, though.
Yeah, Trubisky's not great. I think he could be a backup, but he said he was hungry, though. He said they didn't give him that 5th-year option. Now he's hungry to prove everybody wrong, and he's going to have a great year this year. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl a couple years ago, which I know the Pro Bowl doesn't really mean that much, but, like, he's a Pro Bowl quarterback. I mean, that's not that bad. So I don't know. Ryan, what do you think about the quarterback room?
Okay. First of all, he's not a Pro Bowl quarterback. I don't care if he made the Pro Bowl. He's not a Pro Bowl quarterback. Like Chris said, Nick Foles is like a minor upgrade, but he should really be a backup, not a starting quarterback. So I don't feel sorry for the Bears, though. I hate them, so I hope they have fun with those 2 crappy quarterbacks. And like I said, this is a 6 or 7 win team.
Yeah, I will say, as a Lions fan, Bears fans were kind of annoying a year ago when they had one good season. Like, they were in the cellar. They were worse than the Lions for like 6 years there for a while. And then they won the division one time, and they were like, "Oh, yeah, we're going to the Super Bowl this year." And then they were like 8-8 and were terrible. So I don't know. Maybe Trubisky proved some people wrong, but I highly doubt it. I think this is last year in Chicago. And for that Bears front office, just got to eat them up inside that they could have got Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes, but instead they got Mitchell Trubisky. Not only did they get Mitchell Trubisky, they traded up to get Mitchell Trubisky. So that's that definitely paid off for them, I think. So any other Bears talk? Like Chris said, this is kind of a pretty boring team relatively. They got a good defense, but not a great offense. Anything else you guys want to add before we jump into our fantasy studs?
No, this team's boring. No, I'm kind of done talking about them.
All right, Ryan, how would you start us? I think Chris started with the Packers, so Ryan, start us off with your fantasy pick.
Well, if I have to pick anybody in the offense, I think it's going to be Allen Robinson. One of the better receivers in the league. Doesn't get enough attention because, like we said before, he plays some really bad quarterbacks. If he were on any other team, he would be putting up some monster numbers. I mean, he does put up some solid numbers even with bad quarterback play. But yeah, Allen Robinson, look for him to be like a wide receiver 2, fringe wide receiver 1. But yeah, really pay attention to that quarterback situation.
That's a good pick right there for sure. I think him and Foles could have a decent connection, and he could retain that low end wide receiver 1 production, like Ryan said. I also don't think he gets enough attention. I think he's one of the more underrated receivers in this league. If he played with a competent quarterback, even like a league average quarterback, I think he'd do really well. He'd do really well. And this is a guy I really like. He's definitely one of my favorite receivers in the league. I kind of want to talk about David Montgomery. Maybe not a guy I'm super excited about, but I think he's getting just a lot of hate. Last year, they had such poor quarterback play. They couldn't stay on the field. Their offensive line, while it's still really bad, it was horrendous last season. So I mean, maybe it'll get a little better this year with some more development in there. But I think Montgomery can retain some low end RB2 value. I think he's a player you can draft in the 5th or 6th round, and you can get some pretty good value out of him in your flex position because people, like I said, people are they hated how he did in his rookie season, but he did have almost 900 yards on the ground last year and over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. He's a decent receiving back. I think Foles could check it down to him a decent amount, and him and Cohen both could be pretty decent players. I do want to talk about Cohen really quick as well. I think he's also a player that can retain some flex value. He catches a lot of passing. He was super efficient last year, but 2 years ago he was a top 12 back. You do have to remember that. He's not going to do that again, but I think he could be a top 30 back.
Yeah, well, Chris, you just stole both my picks, so thank you.
Oh, sorry, dude.
Because Montgomery,
you could add to it.
No, I'm gonna add a little bit, but then I have another pick that I was gonna say. But Montgomery, I think if he kind of drops a little bit in leagues, I think he could definitely maybe pay off for your team. Even if maybe he goes undrafted in some leagues, who knows? I don't think that's gonna happen though, because I mean he was a kind of a people were really kind of high on him going into last fantasy season, and he really let a lot of people down, including myself, because I was kind of thought he was gonna be pretty good. It's just like that quarterback play is just it really hurts his entire offense. As you said there, Ryan, Allen Robinson could be like a wide receiver 1 if he was on pretty much any other team with a more competent quarterback. So you kind of have to take that into account when you take any of these Bears offensive options, but they could still prove good in your lower end of your roster. But as I said, the offensive options aren't great because of the bad quarterback play. So I'm going to go with their defense. I know defense isn't the sexy pick when it comes to fantasy, but they do really kind of pay off for your team when you have a good defense. And the Bears, I know they weren't as historic as they were back in 2018 last year, but they were still top 10 in passing yards, rushing yards, and total yards allowed per game. And they allowed the 4th lowest points per game as well. So it's still a really good defense. As we mentioned, they didn't lose a ton. They actually kind of gained some people back because of injuries. And Khalil Mack, again, is one of the best defensive players in the league. So when you're taking a defense and you kind of miss out maybe the top options. I think a lot of people are low on the Bears this year. You can kind of take them, and I think they could be a really good option there for your fantasy team.
Yeah, I like that pick for sure. Do we want to jump into our offseason grade for them really quick?
Yeah, I can start us off. I'll just go with a solid, I don't know, C-, I guess. I'm not too this is just not an exciting team.
No.
They added Nick Foles. I mean, they did need to add a better quarterback. And Nick Foles, I guess, is better than Trubisky, but I don't know. I mean, I look at it. There was a lot of rumors going around that they were going to get Cam Newton, and I think that would just been a lot more exciting for this team if they got Cam Newton. But instead, they got Nick Foles, which I don't completely understand. I guess they were worried about what it was going to do to Trubisky's psyche if they got like an MVP level quarterback in Cam, but. At this point, who cares? You're probably not going to re-sign him after this year anyway. So
yeah, they're definitely not. I mean, they already got rid of his 5th-year option, so they're not going to retain him this year. No one's paying that guy $25 million to be one of the worst quarterbacks in NFL history because the dude is just flat, absolutely terrible at quarterback. And I'll give him a C- as well. I don't even want to talk about the grade. I just want to keep talking about Trubisky. The guy can't throw the football. It's going to be another bad season. If he plays a single snap at quarterback, this is going to be a 3-win football team because that guy is absolutely terrible. He's the biggest liability in the entire league. Worst quarterback in the whole league, and I hate him so much. I think he's so bad. I can't believe how bad he is.
All right. Well, thanks for that hate, Chris. I'm going to give my grade solid C-. I mean, their draft was pretty much useless. The only thing I didn't make this as a D was getting Robert Quinn and Nick Foles to give Trubisky some competition. But, yeah, this was another bad offseason from an NFC North team.
Yeah, it wasn't. I don't think any one of these teams had a really good offseason at all. I think they're all very average to below average, and this was no exception to that.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what grade we gave for each team, but I think they were all kind of like in the F to B range, B- range for the most part. So not a great offseason for any of these NFC North teams, which I think is going to make it a pretty entertaining division because, I mean, there's a roadmap for – I know you guys don't believe in the Lions, but there's a roadmap for each of these teams either completely falling apart or contending for a Super Bowl. Who knows? So
yeah, that's fair.
With that, let's jump into the predictions, and then we'll get out of here. Ryan, how about you start us off here? What's your prediction?
All right, I'm going to start at the top and then go to the bottom. Winner of the division is going to be the Green Bay Packers. They're going to finish 10-6. Right behind them is going to be the Minnesota Vikings. They're going to go 8-8. Third place is the Bears. They're going to go 6-10, and then last place, like usual, the Lions. They're going to finish 4-12.
Yeah, mine isn't super different to that either. I have the same 4 teams, the same 4. I got the Packers at 10-6. I got the Vikings at 9-7, making a wild card berth, maybe. The Bears at 6-10 as well, and then the Lions at 5-11. So I think those two will be pretty close, but they're not going to be anywhere near the top of the division, and I think that's pretty straightforward for me.
All right, I'm gonna go completely off the board here.
No.
I'm gonna say Vikings. Vikings are gonna win the division 11-5, and then I got the Lions at 9-7, and then I got the Packers right behind them at 8-8, and then the Bears in last at, let's say, I think Trubisky is gonna get the start for them, so that's why I'm gonna say they're 5-11.
Yeah, Trubisky's going to start them going right into the trash chute because it's be one of the worst teams in football. If the guy plays like I said, if he plays a single down, one of the worst teams in football.
Yeah, and I think their front office is still just so like behind him for some reason because they don't want to admit that they made a bad pick, even though they kind of already did by not picking up his option. So I think they're gonna start him. They're gonna give him a chance. I think that's why they're gonna. I think regardless of what happens with the Lions, they're gonna be the worst team in this division. So that's just my opinion. But I think the Lions are gonna make the playoffs at 9-7. But I don't need to get back up on my soapbox here. So, do you guys have any final thoughts about the NFC North before we finish this episode off?
No, I think we covered it well. Maybe took a little longer than some of the other divisions because this is they made a lot of moves in the offseason. Not exactly positive, but excited to see how this division turns out.
Yeah, Ryan, anything you want to add or?
I think this is going to be one of the worst divisions in football, despite the records, especially with the Lions and the Bears. Don't be fooled. The Packers are going to make the playoffs because they, somebody's got to make the playoffs from this division. So,
yeah,
it'll be a fun division though, even if there's not like a clear cut number one team coming out of this division. They're probably going to get blown out in the playoffs regardless of who comes out. So, but yeah, that concludes our NFC North deep dive. A lot of fun today. Again, we're the Zone Defense Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Twitter, and Instagram. If you haven't checked out our other episodes yet, we've done a ton of different stuff. If you're into NFL, we've done a NFL Skills Player Draft. We did an NFC East deep dive, also a quarterback rankings video. If you're into NBA as well, we did a deep dive into the Last Dance docuseries, as well as an NBA 2010s decade draft, which is a lot of fun. So if you haven't checked those out already, definitely check those out. But thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll talk to you next time.
Peace.